New York City, a sprawling metropolis that never sleeps, a city of dreams and despair, where the lights shine bright but the shadows run deep. A city of shadows and secrets, where every corner hides a story, and every shadow conceals a truth. In the heart of this urban jungle, the line between right and wrong blurs. A place where the powerful prey on the weak, where the vulnerable are left to fend for themselves in the unforgiving streets. The city is a battleground, and survival is a daily struggle. And none were more powerful than Wilson Fisk, the kingpin of crime. His name struck fear into the hearts of many, a symbol of unchecked power and ruthless ambition. From his penthouse suite high above the city, Fisk surveyed his domain. The city below was his playground, a vast empire built on corruption and fear. A cruel smile played on his lips, a reflection of his cold, calculating nature. He reveled in his power, knowing that he held the city in the palm of his hand. His empire was vast, his reach absolute. From the tallest skyscrapers to the darkest alleys, Fisk's influence was felt everywhere. He was the puppet master, pulling the strings from the shadows. He controlled it all, from the police to the politicians. His network of corruption was intricate and far-reaching, ensuring that his will was law. No one dared to oppose him for fear of retribution. But there was one thorn in his side, one persistent nuisance that he couldn't crush, a symbol of resistance that stood in stark contrast to his reign of terror. Spider-Man. The wall crawler had become a symbol of hope in the city's darkness, a beacon of defiance against Fisk's iron rule. He was the light in the shadow, the hero the city needed. The wall crawler had become a symbol of hope in the city's darkness, a beacon of defiance against Fisk's iron rule. His presence was a reminder that not all was lost, that there was still a chance for justice. A beacon of defiance against Fisk's iron rule. Spider-Man stood resolute, a lone warrior against the tide of corruption. His courage inspired others, giving them the strength to stand up and fight, and Fisk hated him for it. The Kingpin's fury knew no bounds, his obsession with destroying Spider-Man consuming him. But the more he tried to crush the hero, the stronger Spider-Man's resolve became. The battle between them was far from over, and the city's fate hung in the balance. Fisk had clawed his way to the top from the gutters, rising from the depths of the city's underbelly. He had faced countless adversaries, each more ruthless than the last, but his cunning and brutality saw him through. Building his empire on fear and violence, he ruled the streets with an iron fist. His network of loyal henchmen and corrupt officials ensured his grip remained unchallenged. He had crushed his enemies, silenced his critics. He was untouchable. But Spider-Man was different. Unlike the others, Spider-Man couldn't be bought, threatened, or eliminated through conventional means. He was a symbol of everything Fisk despised: hope, justice, the belief in something more. Spider-Man's very presence in the city was a beacon of light in the darkness Fisk had so carefully cultivated. Fisk knew he couldn't let Spider-Man operate unchecked. The hero's actions were inspiring the citizens, giving them the courage to stand up against his reign of terror. The hero's very existence threatened his control, inspired rebellion. People began to believe that they could fight back, that they could reclaim their city from the clutches of crime. He had to be eliminated. Fisk understood that to maintain his power, he needed to remove this symbol of hope. And so, Fisk devised a plan so intricate and devious that it would leave Spider-Man with no choice but to confront him directly. A plan to draw Spider-Man out, to break him, to destroy everything he stood for. Fisk would use every resource at his disposal, every ally and pawn, to set a trap that the hero couldn't escape. He would strike at the hero's heart, at the people he cared about most. By targeting Spider-Man's loved ones, Fisk aimed to weaken his resolve, to make him vulnerable. The battle for the city's soul was about to reach its climax, and only one would emerge victorious. Fisk had a weapon, a young man named Eddie Brock. Brock was desperate, angry, consumed by a darkness that mirrored Fisk's own. Fisk saw an opportunity in Brock's rage, a tool to be manipulated. He promised Brock power, revenge against Spider-Man. All he had to do was follow Fisk's orders. Brock, blinded by hate, agreed. He became Fisk's pawn, a weapon to be aimed at Spider-Man and unleashed. Peter Parker felt the weight of the city on his shoulders. Every night he swung through the concrete canyons, battling injustice wherever he found it. But it never seemed to be enough. Lately, the city felt darker, the crimes more brutal. Fisk's influence seemed to touch everything. Peter knew he had to bring the Kingpin down, but how? Then Fisk made his move. He struck at the heart of everything Peter held dear, putting the people he loved most in danger. Fisk had miscalculated. He had underestimated Peter's resolve, the lengths he would go to protect those he loved. Section 5, Clash of Titans. The abandoned warehouse was a cavern of shadows and dust. The air crackled with tension. Spider-Man landed silently on a steel beam, his eyes scanning the darkness. "I knew you'd come," a voice boomed from the shadows. Kingpin stepped into a pool of dim light, a mountain of muscle and menace. "It's over, Fisk," Spider-Man said, his voice low and dangerous. "Your reign of terror ends tonight." Fisk chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound. "You think you can stop me? I am the Kingpin." Section 6, Strength Against Strength. The battle was brutal. Spider-Man's speed and agility against Kingpin's raw power. Blow for blow, they traded punches that shook the warehouse to its foundations. Each strike from Kingpin carried the force of a wrecking ball. Each blow from Spider-Man was like a hornet's sting, swift and precise. But Spider-Man was tiring. He could feel his strength waning. Fisk was relentless, his anger fueling his attacks. Spider-Man knew he couldn't beat Fisk in a straight fight. He had to outsmart him. Section 7, A Desperate Gambit. Dodging a massive fist, Spider-Man used his momentum to swing up to a catwalk high above. He needed a plan, and fast. Below, Kingpin roared, his voice echoing through the vast space. "You can't hide from me, Spider-Man!" Spider-Man spotted a series of chains supporting a heavy load of steel girders. An idea formed in his mind, a desperate gamble. "You're right, Fisk," Spider-Man called down, his voice deceptively calm. "I can't hide, but neither can you." Section 8, The Price of Victory. With lightning speed, Spider-Man used his webbing to sever the chains holding the steel girders. His movements were a blur, a testament to his agility and strength. Each flick of his wrist sent a web line precisely where it needed to go, cutting through the chains with surgical precision. The massive beams crashed down towards Kingpin. The sound was deafening, a cacophony of metal against metal echoing through the night. The ground shook with the impact, sending shockwaves through the surrounding area. The Kingpin, caught off guard, roared in fury as he struggled to escape the collapsing structure. His eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in anger. He was a formidable opponent, but even he was no match for the sheer weight of the falling steel. He managed to avoid being crushed, but was trapped beneath the heavy steel. His muscles bulged as he tried to lift the beams, but they were too heavy even for him. His breath came in ragged gasps, his face contorted in pain and frustration. Spider-Man landed lightly on a nearby beam, his chest heaving. He took a moment to catch his breath, his eyes scanning the scene below. The battle had been intense, and he could feel the toll it had taken on his body. He had won, but at a cost. The victory felt hollow. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving him with a sense of emptiness. He had saved the city, but at what price? The destruction around him was a stark reminder of the cost of his battles. He had defeated Kingpin, but the city was still in ruins, its people still hurting. The buildings were damaged, the streets littered with debris. The faces of the people he had sworn to protect were filled with fear and uncertainty. How much longer could he keep doing this? The weight of his responsibilities pressed down on him, heavier than any steel beam. He was just one man trying to make a difference in a world that seemed to be falling apart. The price of victory was high, and he wondered if he could continue to pay it. Section 9, Aftermath. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Spider-Man knew he couldn't stay. He had to disappear before the police arrived. He glanced back at the trapped Kingpin, his face contorted in rage. "This isn't over, Spider-Man!" Fisk bellowed. "I will have my revenge!" Spider-Man didn't reply. He launched himself into the night, the echoes of Fisk's threats fading behind him. The city stretched out before him, a dark and unforgiving landscape. He had won this battle, but the war was far from over. Section 10, Scars of Battle. Back in his apartment, Peter peeled off his torn costume, his body aching, bruised. He had pushed himself to the limit tonight, both physically and emotionally. The fight with Kingpin had taken its toll. He could still feel the weight of the city on his shoulders, the burden of responsibility he carried. How many times could he keep doing this? How long until the darkness overwhelmed him too? Section 11. Legacy of the Spider. But even as doubt crept in, a spark of hope flickered within him. He had saved lives tonight. He had made a difference. He thought of the people he had sworn to protect, the city he loved. As long as they needed him, he would be there. He was Spider-Man, and he would never give up. The fight for justice never ends. The city slept, unaware of the battle that had raged in its shadows. But somewhere, in the heart of darkness, a new threat was already stirring.